cold December wind whips across the Mediterranean coast as a young artillery captain surveys the terrain before him. The year is 1793, and 24-year-old Napoleon Bonaparte is about to change the course of military history at the Siege of Toulon. Toulon, a vital French naval base, has fallen into British hands. Royalist rebels, supported by British and Spanish forces, hold this crucial port, along with the French Mediterranean fleet. The revolutionary government is desperate to reclaim it, but after months of failed attempts, victory seems impossible. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte, a junior artillery officer from Corsica. While his superiors focus on a conventional frontal assault of the city, Napoleon's keen eye spots something different. The key isn't the city itself, it's the harbor, and more specifically, a small peninsula called La Guillette. Control this position, Napoleon argues to his skeptical commanders, and Toulon must fall. From this promontory, artillery could command the entire harbor. The British ships would be forced to withdraw, leaving the Royalist defenders to their fate. Through driving rain and bitter cold, Napoleon personally oversees the movement of heavy guns into position. His soldiers drag cannons through mud and over rocky terrain, establishing batteries where others claimed it impossible. The British, recognizing the threat, construct Fort Mulgrave atop La Guillette, a formidable strongpoint soon nicknamed Little Gibraltar. On December 16th, Napoleon's moment arrives. Under cover of darkness and a heavy bombardment, French forces storm Fort Mulgrave. The fighting is savage. Napoleon himself is wounded in the thigh by a British bayonet, but his plan works perfectly. By morning, the fort is in French hands. Just as Napoleon predicted, the capture of La Guillette makes the British position untenable. Royal Navy ships, now under direct fire from French guns, begin to withdraw. The scene in the harbor becomes chaotic as Royalist civilians, desperate to escape the vengeance of revolutionary forces, crowd onto departing vessels. Before leaving, the British fleet sets fire to much of the French Mediterranean squadron and the Toulon shipyards, creating an apocalyptic scene of burning vessels and billowing smoke. But they cannot prevent the inevitable. On December 19th, revolutionary forces enter Toulon proper, and the siege is over. The victory at Toulon catapults the young Napoleon from obscurity to prominence. The victory at Toulon catapults the young Napoleon from obscurity to prominence. His tactical genius and innovative use of artillery catches the attention of powerful figures in Paris. Within 5 years, he will command the army of Italy. Within 10, he will be Emperor of France. The Siege of Toulon remains a masterclass in strategic thinking. Napoleon's success came not from overwhelming force or brutal attrition, but from identifying the enemy's critical vulnerability. By controlling a single key position, he rendered an entire defensive network useless. Today, Toulon remains France's primary Mediterranean naval base. The harbor Napoleon fought so cleverly to control still bustles with military and civilian vessels. And somewhere on those sun-baked hills, the echoes of those desperate December days in 1793 still linger. The days when a young artillery officer named Bonaparte first showed the world his genius. The victory at Toulon wasn't just about reclaiming a port. It was the beginning of a military legend, the first chapter in the epic story of Napoleon Bonaparte. From these humble beginnings would rise an empire that would reshape the face of Europe forever. The spring of 1796 dawned with promise for a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte. At just 26 years old, he stood before the ragged army of Italy. 40,000 men who had been neglected by France's Directory. Their uniforms were tattered, their supplies low, but in their eyes burned a fierce determination that matched their commander's own ambition. Bonaparte's words rang across the assembled troops. "Soldiers, you are poorly fed and almost naked. I intend to lead you into the most fertile plains in the world." The men stirred, hope kindling in their hearts. Their new commander wasn't just offering them victory. He was promising them survival. What followed would become legend. Moving with lightning speed, Bonaparte's forces struck at the seam between Austrian and Sardinian armies. The Austrians, accustomed to slow, methodical warfare, found themselves overwhelmed by French aggression. At Montenotte, Millesimo, and Dago, Bonaparte's troops struck like a hammer, refusing to give their enemies time to recover. The campaign transformed into a masterclass of maneuver warfare. Bonaparte's forces, despite being outnumbered, repeatedly divided and conquered their opponents. By positioning his army at the central point between enemy forces, he could strike at each in turn before they could unite. As spring turned to summer, the French army's victories mounted. The Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont sued for peace, and Bonaparte turned his full attention to the Austrians. At Lodi, French grenadiers stormed across a narrow bridge under murderous fire, earning Bonaparte the nickname the Little Corporal for his personal bravery in the fight. The campaign reached its crescendo at Rivoli in January 1797. Austrian forces attempted to break through to relieve the siege of Mantua, but Bonaparte had anticipated their move. In the pre-dawn darkness, French troops maneuvered into position. When morning came, they struck with devastating effect, sending the Austrians reeling back in defeat. By the time the Treaty of Campo Formio was signed in October 1797, Bonaparte had achieved what seemed impossible. He had defeated 4 Austrian armies, secured northern Italy for France, and transformed a group of hungry, demoralized soldiers into one of the most formidable fighting forces in Europe. But perhaps more significantly, the Italian campaign had revealed a new kind of warfare to the world. Speed, aggression, and the concentration of force had replaced the rigid tactics of the past. A young general had shown that boldness, combined with tactical brilliance, could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The lessons of the Italian campaign would echo through military history, but its immediate impact was clear. France had found its rising star, and Europe had glimpsed its future master. Napoleon Bonaparte had arrived on the world stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Sound of horse hooves and marching troops. Dawn breaks over the Ligurian Alps on April 12, 1796. A young general, just 26 years old, surveys the misty valleys below. This is Napoleon Bonaparte, newly appointed commander of France's Army of Italy, and he's about to change military history forever. Dramatic orchestral music rises. The Austrian and Sardinian armies believe they have the French cornered. The Austrian and Sardinian armies believe they have the French cornered. They've split their forces, thinking they can crush the French between them like a vice. But Napoleon sees something they don't, a gap between the two allied armies. A fatal mistake that he's about to exploit with brutal efficiency. In the dead of night, French soldiers have been silently moving into position. The Austrians, under General Eugène Guillaume Argenteau, are camped near the village of Montenotte, their defenses centered on an old redoubt called Monteneggino. They have no idea they're about to face the full fury of Napoleon's army. At first light, the French strike. Colonel Rampon's troops have held Monteneggino through the night against Austrian probing attacks. Now, as the morning fog lifts, Napoleon unleashes his masterstroke. General La Harpe's division slams into the Austrian front, while General Massena's forces sweep around to attack their flank and rear. Battle sounds intensify. The Austrians, caught completely by surprise, find themselves fighting in 3 directions at once. Napoleon's concentrated forces, 25,000 strong, overwhelm Argenteau's 9,000 men. The French artillery, positioned on the heights, rains down devastating fire on the Austrian positions. By mid-morning, the Austrian lines are crumbling. Argenteau's men, their formation shattered, begin a desperate retreat. They leave behind over 1,000 casualties and hundreds of prisoners. The French losses are minimal, barely 800 men. But this is more than just a tactical victory. The Battle of Montenotte demonstrates Napoleon's brilliant strategy of central position, placing his forces between two enemy armies and defeating them separately before they can unite. It's a strategy he'll use throughout his career. The young general doesn't pause to celebrate. Within hours, he's already planning his next moves. The victory at Montenotte has driven a wedge between the Austrian and Sardinian armies. In the next 2 weeks, Napoleon will strike again and again, forcing Sardinia to sue for peace and driving the Austrians back into Lombardy. The soldiers who fought at Montenotte don't yet know it, but they've just witnessed the birth of a legend. This battle marks the beginning of Napoleon's first Italian campaign, a series of victories that will stun Europe and create a template for modern warfare. The battlefield today is quiet. The hills around Montenotte still stand as silent witnesses to that crucial morning. The old redoubt at Montenotte is little more than scattered stones now, but it marks the spot where a young general proved himself and began his ascent to becoming an emperor. The Battle of Montenotte teaches us something crucial about military genius. Sometimes the most decisive victories come not from overwhelming force, but from seeing opportunities that others miss. Napoleon didn't just win because he had better troops or superior numbers. He won because he saw a gap between two armies and had the audacity to drive right through it. This victory opened the door to northern Italy, began the process of forcing Austria to the peace table, and launched the career of one of history's most famous commanders. The Battle of Montenotte might not be as well known as Austerlitz or Waterloo, but without it, the story of Napoleon Bonaparte might have been very different indeed. In those misty valleys of northern Italy, history changed course. A young general proved his worth, and the modern art of warfare took its first steps into a new era. Dawn breaks over the Ligurian Alps on April 13th, 1796. A thick morning mist hangs over the rolling hills of northern Italy, where a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte is about to demonstrate his military genius. The small town of Millesimo sits nestled between steep valleys, its medieval castle standing sentinel over the surrounding countryside. Austrian and Piedmontese forces have established strong defensive positions here, believing they can halt the French advance. But they've underestimated their opponent's audacity. General Bonaparte, just 26 years old, has already begun implementing his strategy of divided we stand, united we fall. His plan is brilliant in its simplicity. Drive a wedge between the Austrian and Sardinian armies, then defeat them separately. Millesimo is key to this strategy. The French forces move under cover of early morning darkness. General Augereau's division advances toward the Austrian positions, while General Massena's troops prepare to outflank the enemy. The sound of boots crunching on gravel and the quiet clink of equipment breaks the pre-dawn silence. At the heart of the Austrian defense stands the formidable Coseria Castle, occupied by Austrian troops under Colonel Filippo del Corretto. The medieval fortress, perched atop a steep hill, provides a commanding view of the surrounding valleys. Its stone walls have withstood centuries of warfare, but they've never faced the likes of Napoleon's innovative tactics. As the sun rises, French artillery opens fire. The boom of cannons echoes through the valleys as Bonaparte's forces begin their assault. General Augereau's troops charge uphill toward the castle, while Massena's division moves to cut off any possible retreat or reinforcement. The fighting is intense and close quarters. Austrian troops pour musket fire down upon the advancing French soldiers, who scramble up the steep slopes under heavy fire. The air fills with gun smoke and the cries of wounded men. Yet the French press on, driven by their young commander's determination. Colonel del Corretto demonstrates remarkable bravery, rallying his men to defend the castle.
Hold the line, they
Napoleon's
shall not
strategy
pass.
is working perfectly. The Austrian forces find themselves increasingly isolated as French troops systematically cut off their lines of communication and support.
We're out of water, sir, and almost out of ammunition.
By nightfall, the situation for the defenders becomes desperate. Water supplies run low, and ammunition begins to dwindle.
We must hold.
Del Carretto
Reinforcements will arrive
refuses to
soon.
surrender, hoping for reinforcements that will never arrive. His men continue fighting through the night, their musket flashes illuminating the darkness. The next morning, April 14th, brings no relief for the defenders. French forces have completely surrounded the castle, and Bonaparte orders a final assault.
Prepare for the final assault. It's hopeless. We're surrounded, and they will soon breach the walls.
What are your orders, sir?
Lower the flag, we surrender. I will not see any more lives wasted.
Del Carretto, realizing the futility of further resistance and wanting to spare his men's lives, finally surrenders. The Battle of Millesimo proves decisive. Napoleon's victory splits the Allied armies, forcing them to retreat in different directions. The Austrians fall back toward Dago, while the Sardinians retreat toward Chiva. Bonaparte's strategy of dividing and conquering has worked perfectly. The human cost is severe. Over 700 Austrian troops are captured, with hundreds more killed or wounded. The French suffer significant casualties as well, but the strategic value of the victory far outweighs the losses. This battle marks a turning point in Napoleon's first Italian campaign. It demonstrates his tactical brilliance and his ability to identify and exploit enemy weaknesses. The success at Millesimo helps establish his reputation as a military genius and sets the stage for future victories.
Our victory here has opened the door to the rest of Italy. We must press on.
The medieval castle still stands today, its weathered stones bearing silent witness to that crucial battle. The surrounding peaceful vineyards and rolling hills give little hint of the desperate struggle that once took place here. But in 1796, this quiet corner of Italy helped launch the career of one of history's most famous military commanders. The Battle of Millesimo serves as a perfect example of Napoleon's military philosophy: speed, surprise, and concentrated force at the decisive point. It shows how a young general with innovative ideas could overcome traditionally trained armies using superior strategy and bold execution. This victory would be just the beginning. Napoleon's Italian campaign would continue, bringing more triumphs and ultimately changing the face of Europe. But it was here, among the hills of Millesimo, that his legend truly began to take shape. Dawn breaks over the Lombardy plains of northern Italy, May 10, 1796. The morning mist rises from the Adda River as Austrian troops fortify their position on the eastern bank. A young general, Napoleon Bonaparte, observes through his spyglass from the western side, his mind already racing with possibilities. The Austrian forces under Colonel Johann Sabotendorf believe they're safe. They've destroyed all bridges save one, the narrow wooden bridge at Lodi. Their cannon are perfectly positioned to sweep the crossing with devastating fire. Any attempt to cross would surely be suicide. But they don't yet understand the determination of the 26-year-old French commander they face. Napoleon's cavalry scouts report that Austrian reinforcements are still hours away. He knows this is his moment. The French army has been pursuing the retreating Austrians for days, and now, at Lodi, he has a chance to deliver a crushing blow. By early afternoon, French artillery wheels into position. The thunderous exchange begins as both sides trade cannon fire across the river. Under this covering fire, Napoleon assembles a column of 2,000 grenadiers, his elite troops, near the bridge's western approach. The air fills with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Napoleon's plan is audacious. Some would say reckless. He will send his men straight across the bridge into the teeth of the Austrian guns. But first, he dispatches cavalry to ford the river further south, threatening the Austrian flank. At 6 p.m., Napoleon gives the signal. At 6 p.m., Napoleon gives the signal. The French grenadiers surge forward onto the wooden bridge. The Austrian gunners fire, their grape shot tearing into the French ranks. Men fall, but others take their place. The column wavers. The fire is murderous. Then something extraordinary happens.
Forward, citizens.
Follow your leaders.
This is the moment that will earn Napoleon the nickname, the Little Corporal, from his men, a leader who fights alongside them. The French column surges forward again, their boots thundering on the wooden planks. They reach the far side, crashing into the Austrian infantry like a tidal wave. Meanwhile, the French cavalry appears on the Austrian flank, throwing their lines into chaos. The battle becomes a close-quarters struggle, but the momentum is now unstoppable. The Austrian forces break, retreating in disorder toward Cremona, leaving behind their artillery and hundreds of casualties. In his memoirs, Napoleon would later write that it was at Lodi he first believed he could become more than just a general. "I saw myself as a superior being," he reflected, "and the ambition came to me of doing great things." The battle had lasted only a few hours, but its implications would echo through history. It established Napoleon's reputation for brilliant tactical thinking and personal courage. More importantly, it gave his troops unshakable confidence in their young commander. The wooden bridge at Lodi still stands today, a silent witness to that pivotal afternoon. While other battles would prove more decisive in Napoleon's career, few would better demonstrate the combination of tactical brilliance and personal leadership that would make him a legend. Dawn breaks over the Lombardy plains on August 5, 1796. A young general named Napoleon Bonaparte surveys the battlefield near Castiglione delle Stiviere. Below him, Austrian forces under General Wurmser are preparing their positions, unaware they're about to face one of history's greatest tactical commanders. The scene before us is a testament to military precision. 25,000 French soldiers stand ready to face 30,000 Austrians. The morning mist slowly lifts, revealing the stakes of this crucial engagement in the Italian campaign. Just days earlier, Wurmser's forces had broken the French siege of Mantua, forcing Napoleon to consolidate his scattered divisions. Now, after a series of lightning-quick maneuvers, Bonaparte has managed to concentrate his army for a decisive battle. The Austrian army forms two main groups. Their right wing extends toward the hamlet of Solferino, while their left wing anchors itself near Medole. Between them lies the key to victory, the heights of Monte Medolano. Napoleon's plan is characteristically bold. General Massena's division will pin down the Austrian right, while General Augereau's forces threaten the center. But the masterstroke will come from General Kilmain's cavalry, held in reserve for the perfect moment. The battle begins at 5 a.m. with Austrian artillery fire. The sound of cannons echoes across the countryside as smoke begins to fill the summer air. French infantry advance in their distinctive columns, bayonets gleaming in the morning sun. Massena's division engages first, launching a ferocious attack against the Austrian right. The fighting is intense, with volleys of musket fire exchanged at close range. The Austrians hold initially, their white uniforms becoming stained with powder and blood. In the center, Augereau's men face fierce resistance as they attempt to storm Monte Medolano. The Austrian infantry, arranged in their traditional tight formations, pour devastating fire into the advancing French columns. Yet the French press on, their revolutionary fervor matching their tactical discipline. By noon, the battle hangs in the balance. The Austrian forces, though pushed back, remain intact. This is the moment Napoleon has been waiting for. He orders Kilmain's cavalry forward in a massive charge that will become legendary. The ground trembles as thousands of French horsemen thunder across the battlefield. Their sabers catch the midday sun as they crash into the Austrian lines. The impact is devastating. Austrian formations begin to waver, then break. Wurmser attempts to stabilize his position, But it's too late. The French attacks have become too numerous, too coordinated to contain. By mid-afternoon, the Austrian army begins an organized withdrawal, having suffered over 2,000 casualties. The French losses are similar, but they hold the field. The victory at Castiglione proves decisive. Wurmser's army retreats toward Trento, allowing Napoleon to reimpose the siege of Mantua. The battle demonstrates Napoleon's emerging tactical brilliance, his ability to coordinate infantry, cavalry, and artillery in a combined arms approach that would revolutionize warfare. But beyond the military significance, Castiglione represents something more. It shows Napoleon's ability to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, turning what could have been a disastrous French retreat into a triumphant advance. This battle cements his reputation among both his soldiers and his enemies. As the sun sets on August 5th, the battlefield falls quiet. The dead and wounded lie scattered across the blood-soaked fields. Napoleon stands once again on his observation point, now surveying the aftermath of his victory. In just one day, he has secured his army's position in northern Italy and taken another step toward military immortality. The Battle of Castiglione would be remembered as one of the defining moments of the Italian campaign, a testament to the military genius of a young general who would soon reshape the map of Europe. Its lessons in mobility, coordination, and the importance of seizing the decisive moment would influence military thinking for generations to come. In November 1796, the fate of Napoleon Bonaparte's Italian campaign hung by a thread. The young general, just 27 years old, faced a critical moment that would define his legacy and change the course of European history. The Austrian army, determined to break Napoleon's siege of Mantua, had deployed 24,000 men to challenge the French position. Bonaparte, commanding just 18,000 troops, knew he needed a decisive victory at the small village of Arcole, near Verona. On November 15th, Napoleon launched his first assault. French grenadiers charged the Item Bridge, but were cut down by devastating Austrian fire. Again and again, the French troops were repelled. The situation grew desperate as the day wore on. Then came the moment that would become legend. Napoleon himself seized the Item tricolor flag and rushed onto the Item Bridge.
Follow your general.
Grape shot and musket balls whistled past him as he advanced. His aide-de-camp was struck down beside him, and Napoleon himself was pushed into the marsh, nearly drowning before his soldiers pulled him to safety. While this dramatic scene unfolded, Napoleon's real strategy was already in motion. The Item Bridge assault was partially a diversion. Under cover of darkness, he had dispatched Character General Guillou with the division to cross the Adige River downstream and outflank the Austrian position. Through the night of November 15th and into the 16th, French forces executed this complex maneuver. The Austrian commander, Character Colonel Brigido, suddenly found his seemingly impregnable position threatened from multiple directions. On November 17th, the battle reached its climax. The Austrians, their position compromised, began to waver.
En avant pour la France.
We surrender, don't shoot.
French forces struck from multiple directions, and finally, after 3 days of brutal fighting, the Item Bridge at Arcole fell. The Austrian army retreated, leaving behind 4,000 casualties and 4,000 prisoners, compared to 3,500 French casualties. The victory at Arcole proved decisive. It prevented the relief of Mantua and secured French control of northern Italy. More than that, it demonstrated Napoleon's tactical genius, his ability to turn apparent weakness into strength, to use terrain to his advantage, and to inspire his men through personal example. The Item Bridge at Arcole became one of Napoleon's most celebrated victories, immortalized in paintings and propaganda. Antoine Jean Gross's famous portrait of Napoleon leading the charge would become an iconic image of the young general's rise to power. Today, The item bridge at Arcole still stands, a quiet reminder of those 3 dramatic days in 1796. The battle marked a turning point not just in Napoleon's career, but in European history. It showcased the combination of tactical brilliance, personal courage, and strategic deception that would characterize Napoleon's greatest victories. The Battle of Arcole demonstrated that victory often belongs not to the side with superior numbers or position, but to those who dare to reimagine what's possible on the battlefield. In those 3 days along the Alpone River, a young general proved himself worthy of the legend he would become, and the age of Napoleon truly began. Dawn breaks over the frozen slopes of Monte Baldo on January 14, 1797. The icy wind whips through the Alpine peaks as Austrian troops, led by Count Joseph Alvinci, march confidently toward what they believe will be a decisive victory. Little do they know, they're walking into one of Napoleon Bonaparte's most brilliant tactical traps. The Battle of Rivoli begins in near darkness as 28,000 Austrian soldiers advance through multiple columns. Their plan is simple but ambitious: to crush Napoleon's smaller force of 23,000 men through a complex pincer movement. The main thrust will come down from Monte Baldo, while supporting columns move to encircle the French position near the plateau of Rivoli. As the first rays of sunlight pierce through the morning mist, Austrian artillery opens fire. The sound of cannons echoes through the valley, and the battle for Rivoli is underway. The Austrian forces, initially successful, push the French troops back. It seems Alvinci's plan might work, but Napoleon has anticipated this move. Throughout the night, he has carefully positioned his forces, understanding the terrain's strategic importance. The plateau of Rivoli, overlooking the Adige River, is the key. Whoever controls this high ground controls the entire battlefield. The Austrian attack comes in waves. Their central column, struggling up the steep slopes, becomes separated from their artillery. Napoleon seizes this moment. He orders a devastating counterattack, sending his infantry charging down the slopes while his artillery pounds the Austrian positions. The battle reaches its crescendo around mid-morning. The Austrian forces, now split and unable to coordinate effectively, face a nightmare scenario. Napoleon's troops attack from multiple directions, using the terrain to their advantage. French cavalry, led by the fearless Joachim Murat, charges into the Austrian flanks, creating chaos in their ranks. One of the most dramatic moments comes when an Austrian column, attempting to outflank the French position, becomes trapped in a narrow ravine. French artillery, positioned on the heights above, rains down a deadly barrage. The Austrians, caught in this natural death trap, suffer horrific casualties. By early afternoon, the battle's outcome is becoming clear. The Austrian army, once confident of victory, is now in full retreat. Their carefully planned attack has transformed into a desperate fight for survival. Napoleon's tactical genius has turned the terrain itself into a weapon, using the mountains and valleys to fragment and destroy the larger Austrian force. The human cost is staggering. Over 4,000 Austrian soldiers lie dead or wounded on the frozen ground, with another 8,000 taken prisoner. The French losses, while significant, are far less severe, around 2,200 casualties. But the Battle of Rivoli's significance extends far beyond these numbers. This victory secures French control of northern Italy and demonstrates Napoleon's tactical brilliance. It shows his ability to read terrain, anticipate enemy movements, and turn apparent disadvantages into decisive advantages. The battle becomes a textbook example of military strategy, studied for generations to come. It proves that superior numbers don't guarantee victory. It's the intelligent use of terrain, timing, and tactics that often determines the outcome of battle. As the sun sets on January 14, 1797, the slopes of location, Monte Baldo, fall silent. The frozen ground, now stained with blood, has witnessed one of the most significant battles of the First Coalition War. Napoleon's victory at Rivoli helps establish his reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. While the Austrian army retreats, its ambitions of controlling northern Italy shattered on the rocky slopes of the Alps. The Battle of Rivoli stands as a testament to the role of leadership and strategy in warfare, showing how a smaller force, led by a brilliant commander, can defeat a larger army through superior tactics and understanding of terrain. It remains one of the most studied battles of the Napoleonic era, its lessons still relevant in military academies today.